This story truly starts in May of 2016, when Hard Knocks Inc., one of the strongest and wealthiest wormhole alliances in the game, successfully online the game's first Keepstar in their home system of J115405, or as it is more commonly called, Rage. This was to some fanfare, with a PC Gamer article and a scope video being produced to extol the incredible feat of logistics, wealth, and secrecy to be able to do so before anyone else in the game. This also marked a precipitous rise in power of Hard Knocks Incorporated, both in wormhole space and eventually in the realm of K-space, as they began poking at various entities around the map in order to gain content, most notably harassing the drone regions with an army of supercarriers that they were able to stage in the region. In 2018, Hard Knocks for the first time fully committed to a nullsec invasion, entering the metagame as they and the rest of the Holy Empire invaded the DRF properly. This led to them eventually taking over the region of Cobalt Edge, being one of the first wormhole alliances to maintain a presence in both spaces simultaneously. Eventually, a second Keepstar to aid in the defences of the first would be placed on the same grid, this one named Unassailable Wealth. Despite the challenges presented, the historical significance of this being the first Keepstar, and also a Keepstar belonging to one of the most powerful wormhole alliances in the game, it was unavoidable that a target would be painted on the structure. Keepstars had already proven to be vulnerable in wormhole space, despite initial predictions that they would be practically invincible due to the lack of capital parity that is possible in wormhole-to-wormhole evictions. The first such example was even done by Hard Knocks themselves, as they destroyed a Keepstar belonging to Inner Hell, a smaller Russian corporation, using the trebuchet method described in my 9TAC4 video, which was the popular way to assault citadels during that time period. However, the invasion that took place here was a little different, with a major nullsec alliance along with their coalition's support would be attempting to reverse the move that Hard Knocks had made in the northeast, and project their power from K-space into J-space effectively. This meant that for a lot of people, myself included, it was their first ever eviction, and I wanted to give a breakdown of just how a large-scale eviction like this ends up playing out. In order to do that, I'm going to have to break down some of the mechanics of wormhole space. The main difference between wormhole space and nullsec, one that massively changes the game when it comes to fights, is that the geography of systems is fluid. A system that connects to a system today won't connect to that system tomorrow, as rather than using gates, wormhole space uses the aforementioned wormholes. This means that in order to get a decent-sized fleet of the doctrine that the Initiative wished to use to reinforce the Keepstar, the Boosh Raven doctrine, based around ravens which can shoot to 300 kilometers and move around using command destroyers, would require ships to be brought in advance. In order to find out more about what went into preparing for this attack, I spoke to the logistics team who made the whole thing possible. First of all, can you give some idea of the scale of resources that are needed to facilitate an eviction like this, and what you had to move into the wormhole to allow this operation to take place?
There was, as said before, about 46 freighters, some of them containing modules and whatnot, but many of them contain 22 ravens each. So a conservative estimate would be around 750 ravens, I believe 40 Raitarus inside of Iderons, and 46 freighters, all totaling at around 600 billion-esque.
Yeah, and then you got to include some of the rolling capitals that we used and scanning ships.
Also, a lot of tech to command destroyers. I think we ended up seeding about 200, about 100 sponge executors to suck up the Keepstar Doomsday. Seeded like 60 Megatrons that we planned to let goons use, but they ended up using Ishtars and Serbs in the end. Well in excess of 1,000 or 1,200 chips.
So how did you go about moving all of that equipment into the hull?
It started out with Riven seeding almost by himself, actually Rage rolling into Rage, trying to get freighters in, but we soon realized that that was a very tedious and tiresome effort. So what ended up happening was they would find K-space connections directly to Rage and seed in freighters about 1 minute before downtime would happen, so that nobody would ever see the Charons decloak on the other side.
So how long had you been working on this project before the rest of New Eden found out about it?
It's approximately a year. I think Riven has an exact date for when the first freighters were seeded, which I think we're using as kind of an official start of the operation. It's the first thing anything material was done. But obviously, at the start, it was only using the occasional opportunistic connection, and as the operation came closer to being executed, we started watching every day for incoming case spaces and taking every opportunity we could.
Did you have any close calls when you were seeding the hull?
Did we ever? Tom, I think you were there for that one, so you can
Yeah.
explain the boss drop.
Sure. So, like Tiger mentioned, there's a lot of times where we're using low sec holes, which means it's dangerous to get these freighters to the hole. And so we would use things like wormhole chains from low sec to low sec or low sec to high sec to get to the staging target system that's directly connected to Rage. And one time on one of these endeavors, we found ourselves in some nullsec backwater, like dead end kind of area, about a 1 gate jump away from the Rage connection. And so we have 4 freighters en route, and these were loaded up with approximately, I don't know, across all 4 of them, 20 to 40 billion ISK. And sure enough, as soon as we jump the gate into the system we're trying to get into, a prospect decloaks and lights a cyno, and about 6 or 7 blobs drop right on top of the freighters as they're trying to warp off. Riven lands a jam just long enough for me to get some webs onto the last freighter entering warp, and somehow they got away without any of the tackles succeeding in holding us.
Did you ever end up taking any losses when you were trying to move stuff into the hull?
Not a single freighter was lost in this entire operation.
No, that's not entirely correct. We did lose one jump freighter with 12 megatron hulls in it because he accepted the deal request from a Tempest instead of the Weber on a high sec gate.
The initiative's not really known as a traditional wormhole alliance, so how did a group of people with, such an understanding of how to run an eviction come to be a part of the initiative?
Well, all of us used to be in the same wormhole corp. Everyone that's been involved at the top level in this operation, besides the initiative FCs, used to be in a corporation called Tempest Legion, led by Prometheus Starfire. That's kind of, I want to say, infamous, or grew in infamy towards its end. But it collapsed eventually, and some of it had to do with HP. It wasn't the direct reason for it, but it was certainly a factor. And when it did collapse, part of us went to other wormhole corps, and a part of us went to the initiative and kept hanging out and kept in touch.
So you'd say this was almost an operation for revenge?
I would not say that. I would say that this is, it's kind of, when you see someone in power too long, you can see that they get complacent, and a lot of us saw that they were treating people unfairly. So I would say this is not a personal revenge, more as a attempt to shift the balance of wormhole space, in addition to trying to do the impossible.
All right, thank you for your time. Even with all the ships pre-staged in the hull, however, the malleability of routes in wormhole space still played a part in the events to come, as wormhole alliances are also able to manipulate this geography, being able to roll a hole closed by putting more mass through it than it can handle. As such, the initiative's initial fleet was cloaked in mystery as it moved through a drifter wormhole, with only a small group of pilots knowing the intent of the CTA as it rolled through a wormhole chain, with people guessing at hundreds of possible destinations in fleet before landing in Rage. This prevented the initial chain from being closed by hard knocks and allowed the rapid deployment of infrastructure in the hull after quickly killing one of their placeholder towers. As citadels have a 24-hour anchor time before they can be used, the initiative instead anchored poses of their own, equipping them with ship maintenance arrays and component arrays to be filled by the pre-staged freighters. Capitals seated in the hull then manually assembled the ships, dragging each module into its slot and handing them out to pilots one at a time. This was done as multi-fit, and even fit from saved fittings doesn't work using pos mechanics. Over the course of the first 24 hours, this group of pilots fit and handed out nearly 800 ships. During this reshipping effort, the second Stuka fleet the Initiative had brought continued to reinforce or destroy several other towers. This allowed the Initiative to anchor yet more infrastructure and effectively launch a surprise attack, giving Hard Knocks no time to scramble a defense to the 500-plus invaders now laying siege to their home. The attack on the Keepstar from this point went smoothly. However, the invasion was just beginning, as many other wormhole alliances flocked to Hard Knocks' banner and attempted to raid roll into the system. Raid rolling is a tactic that allows entities that live in wormholes to move a large amount of people from one hole to another without being interrupted by hull control, although it can take a relatively long time to work. Wormholes all have either one or two static connections. These are wormholes that connect to a target area of space, and in high-class wormholes, that means to other wormhole classes. When one of these wormholes is collapsed by putting a specialized rolling ship through it, another wormhole to a different randomly chosen system in that same class is generated. This means that for those entities in a system with a C5 static, every time they collapsed their hull, there was a 1 in 512 chance that it would give them a direct link to their beleaguered friends, a chance to get more people, ships, and probers into the hull to help the defenders and get valuable loot out. In order to prevent this, the Initiative ran a 24/7 hull control fleet, primarily in Stukas, as a team of probers watched for new connections and directed FCs to camp the wormholes that were coming in from the outside. Even these defensive efforts weren't enough, however, as a mix of different wormhole entities were able to break through the blockade, embarrassingly when it was under my command, and reinforce Hard Knocks just before the second timer on the Keepstar. These reinforcements, however, quickly found themselves out of the hole again after that timer, where a devastating bomb run took out a chunk of their shield hack fleet, and more crucially killed a large majority of the pods of that fleet, which made it difficult for them to rejoin the fight in later days, as the Initiative continued to hold hull control, preventing the defenders from getting a stable route through which they could bring interceptors and Opux luxury yachts, which would allow them to reship their defenders. In the distance between the armor and hull timer, however, it seemed that the tenor of the war changed from defiance to acceptance, as Initiative members were forced to watch as Hard Knocks DD'd or self-destructed several of their capitals on the Onduck in order to obtain insurance money from doing so, and to deny them as loot to their attackers. This is due to the fact that in wormhole space there is no asset safety, so if you blow up someone's structure, everything inside it is flung into space for the attackers to grab. Despite a few other concerted efforts to break in, the final Keepstar timer was taken nearly without a fight, as a massive force of 1,359 attackers ended up being listed on the kill mail for the structure, with the Initiative and its associated alliances bringing 594, Goonswarm bringing 518, and the rest of the Imperium bringing 180, along with numerous third parties. The destruction of that Keepstar, however, did not signal the end of the invasion, with the Initiative staying to kill both the second Keepstar, along with 8 Astra Houses, 2 Fortizars, 3 Athanors, 2 Reitarus, and a Soitoyo, before finally leaving the hull. Judging by the Reddit posting of one of Hard Knocks' leaders, Braxus, which admittedly is not the most reliable of sources, it seems that the Alliance had gone through some form of internal turmoil prior to this eviction, and was not in the best state to properly respond to such a powerful threat. It's unknown currently what the future plans of Hard Knocks are, however they currently seem to be remaining relatively member stable, not losing members despite their eviction. It's also unclear how Wormhole Space, given its normal distaste for hard political agreements, will respond to the intrusion of Nullsec into their space. I look forward to seeing if the traditional Bushido agreements between wormhole groups are strengthened in the wake of this eviction, or if they find themselves better ways to become eviction-proof. Whatever the end, however, thank you for watching, and fly smart.